If you are an HR professional, a CEO, or a C-level executive that is dealing with underperformance in your organization. My name is Lizzie Claesson, and I work with Brighter Leaders with an amazing team where we share the passion to help leaders and employees become their best version of themselves, achieving peak performance and living healthier, happier lives. Underperformance, it's not an easy subject. However, it's something that at some point all of us have experienced, and it affects not only the individual that's underperforming, but also the peers, the managers, and in big, the whole organization really. I will introduce the subject of underperformance, and I will also give you a little bit deeper insight in terms of neuroscience. That is, what happens to a brain, and when I say a brain, it affects all of us, of course, when these different root causes for underperformance are present. If you identify any of this from having dealt with in the past, or you're dealing with it right now, from our experience, number one reason for underperformance, and that is lack of clear expectations. What's happening? I mean, what kind of situations can create lack of clear expectations? But what I will get into depth today with you is what happens to a brain when clear expectations are not set clearly. And the first thing that happens is that the brain goes into a state of anxiety and stress, and employees experiencing that their expectations are not clear. I mean, executives, employees, what happens with them is that they feel a little bit at lost. So they are uncertain about their roles and responsibilities. And this, of course, is what's causing this anxiety and stress. And as you very well know, stress and anxiety during prolonged periods of time, it's very detrimental for our overall health and, of course, for performance. Another thing that happens in our brains is that we lose focus. When we don't have clear expectations, we don't have a clear direction, a clear purpose, we lose focus. So, of course, all of this makes performance diminish, but I'm going into the depth of what's happening in our brains and in our whole selves. So this ambiguity makes it difficult for individuals to prioritize tasks, and this decreases the focus, which is something that our brains find quite essential. We have what the neuroscientists call the GPS center, and that is, if we give our brain clear instructions of what we want, our brain will help us get there. Why? Because it will focus, just like a camera lens that can focus and have everything else, out of focus because it's unimportant. It will focus and will help us see of the variety of stimuli that we're receiving each day. The brain will help us sort out. The brain cannot process such a high number of information at a conscious level. Much of it goes unconscious. That's in terms of lack of expectations or clear expectations, what happens to a brain and how difficult it is then for a person to perform at their max capacity when this is happening. I think it makes it easier to understand. Reason number two for low performance is inadequate training and development. So once again, let's look a little bit deeper what happens in our brains when this is present. And of course, we're having underperformance. And the reason why we're going through all these causes for underperformance is because the way you treat underperformance depends very much on what is causing it. And it's not just on staying on the obvious, on the symptoms, but going to the root, to the causes. And then in the situation of inadequate training and development, the employee, the executive, might have a feeling of low confidence, where they start doubting in their own capabilities. We've met many leaders, amazing leaders, that have accomplished so much in their career and professional lives, and sit in front of me and are doubting their capabilities because they're not getting the adequate development. Maybe they have all the skill training that they need, all the training for the role, but they're not developing at the level that they would like. And this causes them to start doubting their confidence. And of course, this reflects in their performance, and they feel it themselves. So that's why I started by saying that performance is a very complex issue that does not only affect the person underperforming, but people around. Something else that inadequate training and development creates is, of course, frustration, of a feeling of also of overwhelm, and being unable to perform the tasks, either because there's no adequate training or because the development is not at the level of what is expected or desired. So really important to have systems, have a culture, have processes that enable leadership to always be developing and improving. Please, if you're identifying anything of this from your own experience, please put numbers in the chat. So if it was lack of clear expectations, put a number 1. If it's lack of training, adequate training and development, put a number 2 in the chat. Or number 3, which I'm going to mention now, and is poor management and leadership. This, as I say, we're going through the top causes that might be the reason for underperformance in your team, in your organization right now. So what happens at a neuroscientific level? What happens with our brains in case of poor management and leadership? Poor leadership may and almost always does demotivate employees, and then makes them less enthusiastic, of course, about their jobs. So people that started once in the role with high energy and high motivation, depending on what kind of leadership they're facing, might lose this motivation. And you understand what a pity this is in an organization, right? Not to really see this in time and prevent this motivation from happening. And the other thing that happens as well in our brains is fear and distress. So the fear center in our brain gets activated and starts blocking the executive decision-making network. So decisions are not so good, not so adequate, and the executive, the employee suffering from this demotivation will start acting led by fear and distress rather than by motivation and purpose. And they will probably be afraid of making mistakes and voicing their own opinions. So really important to have systems, have a culture, have processes that enable leadership to always be developing and improving. The number 4 top reason for underperformance, and that is lack of recognition and rewards. And what this creates in our brain is a decrease in the levels of dopamine. So dopamine, we call it the happy hormone. It's not a hormone, it's a neurotransmitter, but it's really not important what we call it. I mean, I'm sorry for all the neuroscientists, of course it's important, but I mean, you and I, who are not neuroscientists, the important thing to know is that dopamine is what makes us happy, what gives us motivation and increases the energy. So not having in place the necessary and adequate recognition and reward systems. And this, mind you, is very much individual based. Of course, a company has its systems, its general systems, but then it's up to each leader to understand what's motivating, what are the key things that motivate each one in the team. So these decreased levels of dopamine, of course, will create a feeling of unhappiness, of dissatisfaction, and eventually, of course, a little bit like disengagement. And this disengagement, you will perceive it as a lack of motivation, like a person that's, this person is not motivated to do his or her job. So let's dig deeper into that. Let's help the person. Let's lead them in the best way, because all of these causes, when understood, can be reverted. I would like also to mention a fifth cause of top 5, the fifth cause of underperformance, which is ineffective communication. Ineffective communication can create a sense of isolation, of not being, of feeling undervalued, and not really feeling a part of the whole. And something that it's very obvious, but I will say it anyway because it's a good reminder. It causes, of course, misunderstandings and conflict. So many times that we've been working with teams and we hear different things from different team members and we realize these team members, they're not communicating or they're not doing it in an adequate way. Because if they were just talking to each other, they would solve this straight away. And of course, this causes conflicts and negative emotions. And sometimes people get clouded by these emotions. We all work differently. So some of us are more sensitive to feelings and some of us are less sensitive to feelings. So when highly sensitive people are perceiving that there's an environment of passive aggression, of things that are not being said, it does create a feeling of isolation, like this is not really where I belong, or we don't have a sense of team, So having this said, I would like very briefly just to give you some examples about what we've seen during the years and how we have managed that. So if we start, for instance, with lack of expectations, just let me go to the LinkedIn page so that I can see. There we are. So lack of expectations. Sorry. What we've noticed when working with teams and it's both operative teams and executive teams, is that it's not so difficult to sit down and define what is my role, what is expected of me, what is expected of us as a team. But the difficulty sometimes relies on the communication. So these causes that I've been talking about, they are interrelated. So it's about trying to isolate these different causes and try to work with tools that can attack the problem, that can look at the problem from different perspectives. Okay, so sometimes it's miscommunication, and a leader that I remember very concretely, a leader I was working with, feeling quite disappointed and frustrated with his management team because they were not at the level of performance that he was expecting, and his perception was they're not motivated, they don't care. And when we started talking about expectations, is it clear? Have you all talked together? What are the expectations on each other, individually, on the team? When they started talking about that, we started finding out that the communication was not fluid. They were talking past each other. So they were talking a lot. So they told me, we've talked about so many times, they were talking a lot, but they were passing each other. So they were not really communicating and understanding each other. So that's one of the things we worked with. And that management team, in less than, I believe it was 4 months, turned the company from going from losses to going to positive results. So you see the amazing results that you can achieve just by working, understanding the root of underperformance, and helping the people so that they can start performing at their best. Because in essence, we all human beings, we do want to perform at our best when it's something we like and we enjoy. As a high performance coach, I love helping people be at their top shape. I will show you the ebook. And here we talk very briefly about the 7 highest causes of underperformance and 7 actionable strategies. A little guide for a manager, for a CEO, could be for an HR professional. Real life cases, some suggestions on things you could do, things that you might want to avoid, and a little summary. Thank you very much for today, and I hope you have a beautiful day or evening or afternoon. Thank you.